I've been an attorney for too long. I've been an attorney for 22 years.
22 years. In your experience, how many clients have you seen maybe involving a police officer? And with that, have you seen a result like this?
We have filed dozens of lawsuits against the St. Louis Police Department. And this is the first time that we've seen that as a result of one of our lawsuits that a police officer is no longer employed.
Do you believe that this person has left because of the lawsuit, or do you think there's been multiple lawsuits that's led up to this?
Oh, I think it's clear that the attention that this lawsuit has brought made the police department finally look at him. This officer had a long history of abuse, and they did nothing. And it wasn't until there was international condemnation of what he did to my clients at Bar PM that he was finally disciplined. And from what I've heard, he resigned instead of being terminated.
What are your thoughts on that? This person resigning rather than actually police doing something about it?
It all depends on if the police department continues their investigation. If they do what I expect, end their investigation because he's no longer employed, he'll have the ability to get a job at another police department someplace else and terrorize citizens of another city. But at least it won't be St. Louis.
Tell us about what this means now potentially for your client's case. I know there's a criminal hearing, but there's also that civil case. So tell us about that.
So we've stated all along, and the video shows that Officer Wallace was the instigator, and that is very relevant to our client's criminal case. He has a hearing in 2 days, and I would hope that now that their star witness has been basically forced out of the police department, and any jury's going to learn about all of that, that they finally drop these ridiculous charges against one of my clients who did not do anything wrong except for question why his husband was handcuffed for asking an officer why he crashed into his building. But we haven't heard anything, and my guess is that the circuit attorney's office is still going to keep pushing forward on these criminal charges. And it's a shame. We're now closing in on 9 months since this happened, and I don't have a jury date or anything. This just hangs over their heads.
And more money and more time.
More stress, more money, more time. This just keeps getting dragged out, and it's terrible.
Hearing Thursday, what are you expecting to come about from there? If you can disclose maybe more evidence.
Yeah, the city of St. Louis has asked to intervene on this case because they don't want to give the full files of this officer and the other officer, which we're sure are going to show that they have a history of this type of abuse. The city has argued unbelievably that Officer Wallace's previous history of abuse is not relevant to the case in which my client ended up getting beat up by him and arrested by him.
Isn't that the whole argument itself?
It seems like basic law school 101, but I mean, I'm not in charge of the city, I'm not in charge of the circuit attorney's office. When they keep doing these ridiculous things, all we can do is fight it. And sometimes at the end, we get a bad officer off the streets.
Potentially, could this case be dismissed on Thursday, or?
Potentially, that's what we're asking for, but there's a new judge assigned to the case, so I'm not sure that, any decision will be made that quickly. But yes, at any moment, now that it's public that this officer doesn't work there anymore and was pushed out because of doing bad things, the circuit attorney's office could absolutely drop the charges.
Do you know why there's a new judge?
Just the previous judge that we have has been elevated.
Got it.
Yeah, so he was promoted up to the higher bench.
Wow. Okay.
And once again, just so we can be clear, this is a misdemeanor. The amount of resources and effort, I'm expecting tomorrow 3 to 4 government prosecutors and attorneys to be in court tomorrow to fight us on a misdemeanor in which the officer who instigated this has now been exposed as being a bad guy.
Your reaction or your client's reaction to hear, well, really, what is Chad and what do they think about the officer now not with the police department?
They're somewhat relieved that he's being held accountable. They're still terrified if he's going to do anything, or they're still utterly stressed out that these criminal charges are still pending. But I told them that they should be proud of themselves because they stood up, and they've gotten somebody who's done this to many people off the streets, at least off the streets of St. Louis. Whether he shows up in some other town, I don't know.
Really, my last two questions. I know I spoke to Stokes about the settlement that he reached over the summer, about his client. He said his client is still physically not okay. Really, hearing about that settlement, what does that give you inclination of?
Well, remember, we have another lawsuit against Officer Wallace for beating somebody else in the jail. And I think that's a common theme. People who expect police to protect them and then get beaten by those police have long-term negative outcomes on this. You just saw this with the Miami Dolphins player. You have 3 NFL players just going to a game and getting handcuffed, and they were worried for their lives. That's going to have long-term emotional effects on people.
When you hear a settlement, does that give you maybe inclination of fault, or does that give you any, that potentially the city's admitting, hey, we're done? Or?
I mean, the more times this guy gets held accountable and the more we can show that the city's known about him for years and did nothing helps our case.